Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Sanctuary. We have got a spine-tingling show for you today. We've been hitting you with short, concise, well thought out redraft content for the last month. Today we're throwing that all out the window. We are going hot takes. We are going to bring things that we want to say, we want to tell you, but perhaps they're not based in the most facts. So, Tom, we are going to dive straight in. This is my one. This is a team that I've been hyping up all off season. And now I can stand here and say wholeheartedly, I believe the Falcons are going to be a truly elite offense this year. I'm talking Desmond Ridder, top 24 quarterback, Bijan Robinson, top 5 running back, Drake London, top 12 wide receiver, and Cole Pitts, top 5 tight end. Tell me, am I crazy?
I think the one which stands out to me is Kyle Pitts. I think Desmond Ridder becoming a top 24 quarterback is within the range of outcomes if all these things hit. I don't think it's possible for Bijan, London, and Pitts to all hit without him getting there. It's kind of like the Geno Smith effect last year. If we were happy drafting Tyler Lockett and Geno Smith where they were in drafts, then we had to be happy saying that Geno Smith could have positive outcomes, and he did have positive outcomes. When you look at Drake London, I think he's an ascending star. He's coming into this season healthy, and I really like what he can bring to the table. I have some doubts about Kyle Pitts, and I've been drafting him at points this year, and I think his ceiling outcomes are fantastic. If we're talking about where he can finish overall, you're probably going to need him to average around 12 PPR points per game, something around that kind of range. You're probably looking at him to get, like 5-6 touchdowns to really be in this range. And you're really hoping that he's going to get into the kind of target range of 70, maybe more balls per season. So I think it's easier for me to say, okay, Drake London is definitely going to be having a breakout season and at the same time as Bijan. But yeah, when it comes to Kyle Pitts as well, that's the one I'm a little more worried about. But yeah, I mean, I love it. I'm very much interested in the Falcons this year.
I just think that this whole offense is going to take a step forward. We keep hearing time and time again, Arthur Smith doesn't throw the ball. Well, yes, they averaged 22 pass attempts per game, but that was 26 pass attempts a game with Desmond Ridder under center. And I think that with an entire offseason to build an offense around him, I wouldn't be shocked if that was creeping up towards that 28 to 30 number, which is almost average for the league. If you're adding an extra 6, 7, 8 pass attempts per game, I think this offense is going to be so concentrated in these 3 stars that I wouldn't be shocked if Bijan can get a 15% target share. Drake London can be 25 to 30%, and Kyle Pitts can be north of 20%. And I think that if that offense is going to take a step forward in pass attempts per game, these 3 superstars that they were drafted to be, the offense is going to be so congested and focused on those 3 assets that I think all 3 of them can be superstars. And if those 3 are stars, that's going to bring Desmond Ridder along for the ride.
If Bijan finishes in the top 5, where do you think that leaves Tyler Algier?
I think the true answer is it depends how much Bijan is used as a wide receiver. I think that given the fact that at the moment, off the top of my head, I'm thinking there's Matt Collins is the other wide receiver. Who else have they got? They've got Kadarius Hodge.
Scotty Miller.
Yeah, Scotty Miller. Like there's nobody there that's going to command decent volume of snaps. So are we going to see a lot of this pony package with Bijan and Algier on the field? Can Bijan line up out of the slot, which then means Algier can get some work? I still think Algier is going to be useful. I think he's going to have weeks as a flex option, but I don't think he's going to eat into enough of the workload to stop Bijan being a stud, London being a stud, Kyle Pitts being a stud. So moving on to your first hot take then, Tom. Talk us through it.
Yeah, so Juwan Johnson and Gerald Everett outscore all rookie tight ends. And I'll take this in points per game. I'll take this in total points, however you want to spin it. I think these 2 tight ends are being very much undervalued in favor of the rookie tight ends who on Underdog, on DraftKings, they're shooting up draft boards at the minute. And yes, there's a week left of drafting season before the season kicks off. But Luke Musgrave, we've seen his ADP rocket. We've seen, Dalton Kincaid, his ADP has been up ahead of these 2 all off season. And that's part of it. I believe in these 2 way more than I believe in any individual rookie tight end, even in a great class like this, and particularly Dalton Kincaid or Luke Musgrave or Michael Mayer, because you look back at the historic stats, and since the start of the 2000 season, 384 tight ends have played in the NFL in a rookie year and recorded a stat of some form or another. Of those 384, only 2 have scored 10 or more points on average across their rookie season. So quite often we kind of picture tight end scoring as like it's possible for him to get to certain levels. And that was the absolute ceiling outcome. But when you filter it down to only players who were drafted, there's still 255 tight ends, but within that, 44% of them averaged less than 1.9 points per game. Only 12% of them averaged over 6.5 PPR points per game. So I don't mind taking shots on some of these rookies in best ball format where you can mix them in and you can be building a free tight end room. But I don't think that any of these can outscore Juwan Johnson, who was only behind George Kittle and Travis Kelce in total touchdowns last season. And then Gerald Everett, who I think is a very underrated tight end. I think he's excellent after the catch. We've seen Kellen Moore feature tight ends at times when he was in Dallas. And I believe in the passing game with the Chargers, and I believe in what Juwan Johnson did last year enough that I'm confident that these two are going to be better than any rookie tight end on the board.
Are you concerned now? This is a big if, but if Michael Thomas can stay healthy, if Keenan Allen can stay healthy, if Mike Williams can stay healthy, if Quentin Johnson can stay healthy, are you worried that both these offenses have got too many mouths to feed to sustain that level of potential production for Juwan Johnson and Gerald Everett?
Not too much, because you look at what was going on last year with the Saints, and Juwan Johnson tied the team with target inside the 20 with 11. That was tied with both Kamara and Chris Olave. So it wasn't like last year he was playing there and there was nobody that he was having to compete with. You know, Chris Olave was excellent, but he wasn't getting as many red zone targets. I think inside the 10, Juwan Johnson led the team with 4 compared to Olave's 2, Kamara's 1. So I kind of feel like this is just an area of the game that Juwan Johnson is particularly good at. And yes, he's had a quarterback changes here to Derek Carr. Andy Dalton played as well as Andy Dalton could have played last year. So perhaps there's a touch of regression. But Juwan Johnson, he put on muscle this offseason so that he feels like he can play as a more well-rounded tight end at times. And all reports have been that he's been excellent. So I've got complete faith in him. And I think people have been worried about taking the Saints tight end, worried about what Taysom Hill will do. Taysom Hill isn't a tight end. Taysom Hill is a running back. He can't catch the ball. He's not a receiver. He's called a tight end because people don't know what to do with him. Juwan Johnson is a pure tight end, and he's fantastic at it in my eyes.
Yeah, look, I'm pushing back, but let's be honest, I agree wholeheartedly, because my next hot take: no rookie or sophomore tight end finishes as a top 12 tight end on the season. And this is building off the back of what you've said. Rookie tight ends don't produce. Sophomore tight ends, we overhype young tight ends year in, year out. I did a study last offseason. Tight ends aged under 25 that are ranked between Dynasty Tight End 8 and Dynasty 24. They've got a 33% chance of producing a top 12 season. Year in and year out, we hype up these guys that Greg Dulcich, Chiga Okonkwo, they flash a little bit, and then we dive all in and we're like, they're the next superstar. And then they just disappear. You think back to, someone like Dustin Keller. He was a first-round pick. He had a good rookie season. Everybody dived in, hyped him up, and then he just disappeared. He fell off the face of the earth. Year in, year out, it happens every time. And I just don't think that any of these rookie or sophomore tight ends can be someone you can bank on for your, week in, week out redraft dynasty tight end, whatever. I would much rather go for a veteran that I think you can get so much more bang for your buck and return on investment.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Greg Dulcich was somebody early on in draft season I was being aggressive on in best ball drafts. I thought that he had shown enough that he could be a real weapon for the Broncos if the Broncos were able to take a step forward. Now we're at a point where Sean Payton seems infatuated with players who used to be with the Saints. They just traded for Will Lutz. They've already traded for Adam Troutman. Adam Troutman is a blocking tight end, but the Broncos seem to want to really run the ball. It feels like they'll be quite happy loading up their tight end and putting Adam Troutman out there as an extra offensive lineman at times, and the tight end won't be a feature of this offense. And one of the things that I loved so much about Greg Dulcich last year was that he was able to get vertical. Like, you saw his shots, like the targets, they were down the field, they were up the seam. He was a really interesting and exciting player, and that's why he ended up having so many, like, I think he was a top 12 tight end in 2 of his first 3 games, which isn't necessarily common for a rookie. But the writing just seems to be on the wall this year that things aren't looking particularly good for him. I think Sean Payton doesn't seem particularly bothered by him, and he's the only one that I would put as a chance to get into the top 12, perhaps more so if Jerry Jeudy is injured for a long time. Chigozie Okonkwo, look, I loved Okonkwo. I thought he had a fantastic breakout towards the end of last season, but this Titans offense is going to be bad. And betting on a tight end to produce when you've got a volume hog like DeAndre Hopkins, I can't bet on more than one outcome in the passing offense for the Titans.
Yeah, I think, don't get me wrong, from a best ball standpoint, I can kind of understand taking some of these rookie and sophomore tight ends because I think they're going to have spike weeks. I just don't believe that week in, week out, across the entire season, they are going to be able to put up the volume and enough fantasy points to finish as top 12 tight end. So that's why I'm fading all of them in redraft and dynasty to a certain extent. So Tom, it was a matter of time before we started talking about a Ravens player. So hit me. What we got?
Yeah, it's J.K. Dobbins finishes inside the top 12 running backs. I think this is absolutely one that I believe in. You know, I could have given you a number of Ravens homer takes, and there's plenty of them. And, you know, you've seen my best ball exposures. I'm heavy on the Ravens, and I really believe in this offense. It's going to take a step forward. They're going to be explosive. They're going to be scoring a lot of points a lot of the time. But J.K. Dobbins in particular, you know, he's a year further removed from his ACL injury. This time last year, there was no positive news about him. It was miserable. He was limping. He looked stiff out of his drills that he was doing in training camp, and he was fighting with people on Twitter because of it. But this year, there's none of that. There was the initial worry that he was holding in, but he was talking to reporters last week, and he seemed completely at ease going into the season without a contract. Throughout his career, he's only averaged 11.2 touches per game, which is not what you want to see. That's definitely not going to get you into the top 12 running backs unless you have like a Jamal Williams type year and score 17 touchdowns. But when we look at what Todd Monken's done as an offensive coordinator, in 2016-17, when he was in Tampa Bay, Doug Martin averaged 17.1 touches per game. In 2018, again under Todd Monken, Peyton Barber averaged 15.9. And then when Monken was in Cleveland in 2019, Nick Chubb averaged 21 touches per game. So he leans into talent when he's got it. And Nick Chubb also that year had his highest ever receiving targets per game as well. And that's a focus point of Todd Monken's offense. If you've read any Ravens beat reporters' work this offseason, they've talked about in training how the running backs are catching more balls. And that was something which Greg Roman never featured when he was offensive coordinator there. Todd Monken loves the screen game, and we know these running quarterbacks don't like to check the ball down. But that doesn't need to be what Lamar's doing. If there's designed passes to the running backs, if you're setting up screens to J.K. Dobbins, if you're giving him options like that, then J.K. Dobbins can still set a career high in receiving work. I think he can set a career high in touches easily. And we glimpsed it slightly at the back end of last year when he led the league in rushing yards and big runs between weeks 14 to 17, and he was like running at like 7 yards per carry. I'm all in on J.K. Dobbins, and if I was being really spicy, I'd say he could finish as a top 8 running back.
No, I'm not going to push back at all. I think you've summed it up perfectly. I love J.K. Dobbins. My best ball exposure, my dynasty exposure shows how much I'm all in on J.K. Dobbins. I think that he can be a top 12 running back, maintaining the level of receiving work that he's done. If we're going to see an increase in that you've been talking about for the last kind of year, it feels like, then yeah, that's absolutely within his range of outcomes. Now, whilst you're being positive, talking up a player, I'm going to be negative. Austin Ekeler, currently going as running back 2 in most formats. I've seen him going ranked as the running back 1 in many. I don't think he finishes as a top 12 running back this year. He is coming off back-to-back seasons. He was the running back 2 in 2021. He was the running back 1 overall in 2022. But I think this offense is about to go through a massive change. We've seen Kellen Moore has been brought in. There has been so much made about Justin Herbert's ability to try and do everything correctly and process through his reads and therefore check down too much. I think his ADOT is going to skyrocket this year. I think he's going to push the ball downfield. And I think that's going to massively eat into Austin Ekeler's targets. He saw 128 targets last year, and that was such a huge part of his fantasy output. He had 28.3% of his fantasy points last year came purely from receptions. Now, you add into the fact that he's coming off seasons of 20 touchdowns, 18 touchdowns. Some of you may say, well, that proves that he can score a lot of touchdowns. I say that proves that there is some big regression coming. I don't necessarily believe that the Chargers are going to be so run heavy in and around the goal line. I think that they've brought in a guy like Quentin Johnson to be a movable piece and to be a weapon in the red zone. And also, Mike Williams hopefully is going to be healthy, and he is a big-bodied red zone weapon. I think that he is going to see fewer targets. I think that he is going to see fewer touchdown opportunities. And I also think that Josh Kelly has shown in the preseason that he is starting to put it together. He was appalling last year. The Chargers had nobody that could complement Austin Ekeler. From what I've seen from Josh Kelly in the preseason, I'm slightly intrigued. I'm slightly excited. If he's into Austin Ekeler's workload in the rushing game, even 10, 20% of those carries, that's a huge deal because we're talking about fewer touchdown opportunities, fewer receptions. If we're also throwing in fewer rush attempts, then I just think that, maybe top 12 is a little bit spicy. Maybe I'm being a bit too over-egging that a bit, but I just think that he is due for massive regression, and I think that he's being hugely overdrafted for what he's going to be.
I really like this tape because early on in the offseason, I was fading Austin Ekeler, and for a lot of the reasons you said, the touchdowns are the obvious one, that the regression there could easily come back to bite him in the ass. But also, the receptions. He had a career best 6.5 targets per game last year, which was, significantly up from his 2019 to 2021 average of 5 per game. And yes, it's only 1.5 more per game, but when you're talking like 25% of it, that's a big increase. And Austin Ekeler must be the only player in the NFL who wants the ball less. Every other player, it's like, feed it. I want to touch the ball. J.K. Dobbins came off the Ravens playoff game, and he was so pissed off because he wanted to touch the ball more. He couldn't understand why Greg Roman was subbing in Gus Edwards. Meanwhile, Austin Ekeler, every offseason says, one of the backup running backs needs to stand up and take more work because I can't take all the touches. So I think when Austin Ekeler does fall off, it is going to be real and it is going to be noticeable. And going back to what you mentioned about Justin Herbert's average depth of target last year as ADOT, it was 6.4, which was like right down towards the career low. It was a career low, but it was also like right at the bottom of the NFL last year. But even when Mike Williams and Keenan Allen got back for those last couple of games last year, it jumped up to like 7.4, which is much more in line with an NFL average. And I think that's much more what we see. I think, the fact that Kellen Moore's got Mike Williams playing in the slot in training camp, they want to look at different options for getting the ball out in plus matchups. And maybe outside the top 12 is a little spicy, but I think, let's see, when it happens for Austin Ekeler, it's not going to be pretty. And the opportunity cost of drafting him in the first round, when you're wrong on that, that's really going to cost you a season.
Absolutely. So another guy, Tom, that you've been banging the drum for the entire offseason, another opportunity to wax lyrical about Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I mean, Cooper Kupp for me, I don't understand why there's any debate about his draft position. For me, he should be the wide receiver 2 at an absolute minimum. You look at what Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson have for competition within their own team. Justin Jefferson faced competition from TJ Hawkinson, from Jordan Addison. Jamar Chase from T. Higgins, somebody who we believe that could be a wide receiver 1 on virtually any other NFL team in the league. Meanwhile, let's look at the Rams. They have Van Jefferson, Tyler Higbee, Demarcus Robinson, Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell, and those aren't players who are doing anything to threaten Cooper Kupp's workload. Even if you look at running back, there's Cam Akers, who I'm out on, who I think isn't a particularly good running back. So you go back and then say, what did Cooper Kupp do last year? Oh, he got injured. But before he got injured, he was putting up 22.4 PPR points per game, which was only behind Justin Jefferson's 22.6. And out of the top wide receivers, there were only 3 to have a target share of 30% or greater. It was Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, and Cooper Kupp. And even when the Rams were awful, it didn't matter for Kupp. He averaged 90 yards per game, which was the third most, 10.9 targets per game, which was the third most. And this Rams defense is going to be even worse this year. They got rid of Jalen Ramsey. They're in the soft rebuild, and they are going to be behind so often, and they're going to throw the ball so often. Matthew Stafford looks to be healthy. Cooper Kupp sounds like he's going to be completely fine by the season starts. And Cooper Kupp is my wide receiver 1 overall. And I wouldn't be surprised if he broke some of the records that he set 2 years ago.
Is there any concern from you that we see a repeat of last year where the season's not going well? It's, the Rams roster is absolutely abysmal, and Cooper Kupp or Matt Stafford or Aaron Donald get a little niggly injury, and it's like, right, let's just put them on the shelf for the year and let's target 2024.
Well, the NFC isn't particularly good outside of like 2 or 3 teams. So, I mean, if we're throwing out kind of spicy takes, would it be that surprising to see the Rams in contention for a wild card spot into like late November, December? And I think part of the reason why players like Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald went on the shelf when they did last offseason was because they were coming off the Super Bowl. Nobody expected this massive regression to hit them like a ton of bricks. And it seemed to affect Sean McVay, who had issues off the field as well. His wife's Ukrainian, and he found that very difficult. I think one of his family members passed away. So, like, Sean McVay was in a miserable spot, and he wasn't able to lift his players. The players, they all felt like huge misery with the letdown after the Super Bowl. So it felt like at the time when Cooper Kupp went on IR and decided to have the tightrope surgery for his foot injury, that if the Rams had been in contention, he could have gutted through it and he could have played through it. So no, I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, I guess it's pretty rare that teams basically mail it in 2 years in the trot, isn't it? And I think that this team is going to be better than they were last year. I think that as long as that offensive line can hold together, I think there's some potential hope there. Well, you've waxed lyrical about your guy. Time for me to talk about Diontae Johnson. We're 23 minutes into this show and I've not mentioned his name yet. Feels slightly ridiculous. I think he's going to be a top 3 round pick in redraft and best ball next season. This is a guy that was wide receiver 8 overall in 2021. He then had a down year with a rookie quarterback. And it's like, yeah, all you hear constantly is that rookie quarterbacks are bad for wide receivers. It's the reason why Michael Pittman is falling currently in best ball and redraft. Well, we expected that from Diontae Johnson, yet his value hasn't rebounded. He had 0 touchdowns. If he'd have had his career average of about 6.8 touchdowns last year, he'd have finished as a top 24 wide receiver. He'd have finished as wide receiver, I think, 17, 18 overall. Then he would have been drafted in that wide receiver round 3, round 4 range this year. Where he's going at the moment is absolutely criminal. This is a guy that year in, year out is going to command top 10 targets at the wide receiver position. You can almost pencil him in for 120 plus targets right now. Plus, this whole offense is going to take a step forward. Kenny Pickett, year 2 leap. He's looked phenomenal in preseason. I think that they've got the offensive line now. They obviously traded up and got the right tackle in the first round. I think that this whole offense is coming together and taking a step forward. And I think that Diontae Johnson is an absolute steal this year. He's going to produce points and therefore he's going to be drafted much higher this time next year.
Yeah, I agree with you here. I think you look at where Diontae Johnson's going. So you're talking about a 5th round pick this year. And he needs to jump up to the 3rd round. So you're talking about 10, 11 wide receiver spots in redraft or best ball. I think George Pickens is the shiny toy, which a lot of people want. The George Pickens fan club is hardcore. They are big truthers to the Pickens' ability. But Diontae Johnson, what we've seen from him over the years is that he's a target earner. He earns targets, like earning 147 targets last year. That's no accident. He ranked 67th in catchable targets last year among wide receivers with 20 more. So it was on not just Kenny Pickett, it was also on Mitch Trubisky, it was on the Steelers as a whole. They weren't a good offense last year. They scraped the way to a winning record, which was their Super Bowl victory. And I just think that this whole offense is going to take a much more competent step forward. I think when the Steelers kind of let Kenny Pickett down in some ways by not starting him from the get-go, and with a whole offseason tailored to Kenny Pickett, Diontae Johnson is absolutely going to have a bounce-back season. He's a screaming buy in Dynasty and an auto pick for me in redraft and best ball.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's kind of, what do you want in a wide receiver? Do you want the Calvin Johnson theory, the big-bodied outside guy that's fast, that makes those glamour catches but doesn't score fantasy points? Or do you want the guy that commands targets? After all, targets don't lie. And Diontae Johnson, to me, is going to be the guy that is going to consistently score more fantasy points than George Pickens. Yet George Pickens is always going to be the guy that gets the hype because he gets those glamour catches and those highlight plays. And yeah, for me, it's never a conversation. Give me Diontae Johnson over George Pickens every single day of the week. Now, whilst we're talking about the Steelers' offense, talk to me about Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, so my next one is that Kenny Pickett is going to throw more passing touchdowns than Justin Fields. And you look at where they're going in drafts, there's about 10 rounds between them. And this goes back again to the point about what I was just saying. Kenny Pickett, the Steelers let him down last year. They waited to put him in until a tough run of games where he faced the Jets, the Bills, the Bucks, the Dolphins, the Eagles, Saints, and Bengals in his first 7 games. There's plenty of good defenses in there. He managed 3 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions across that time, and he only went on to throw 6 touchdowns across his whole 12 games in the fantasy season, which he's just primed for a bounce back. His low touchdown rate of 1.7% was the 660th lowest rate among quarterbacks to start 10 games or more since the year 2000. That's at 679, so it was really bad. But it feels so easy to project Kenny Pickett to go from like 1.7 touchdown rate to sort of 3.4, like double that rate. And league average over the last 3 seasons for quarterbacks who've started 10 games or more has been 4.5%. So I'm not even betting on him to be league average. I'm just betting on him to be better than he was last year and get to over 20 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Justin Fields, he had 1.1 passing touchdown per game. He had 17 total, which was 17th most. But I've got much more belief in this Steelers offense than I do the Bears. The Bears, they're still rebuilding. Yes, they went out and got DJ Moore, who is by far the best wide receiver that Justin Fields has ever played with. But DJ Moore isn't a prolific red zone option. We've never seen him score touchdowns at a good rate. It's always, I believe it's like 4 or 5 per year is the absolute max for DJ Moore. And he just doesn't seem to earn them in that area. They've got a couple of tight ends who it sounds like they're going to lean on. Even Robert Tonyan, Bears beat reporters are talking up as somebody that they'll lean on in the red zone. So I just don't see them being a prolific passing attack yet. Justin Herbert ranked 56 in EPA last year among 57 quarterbacks, and that's like an efficiency metric. He just wasn't good at passing the ball. And this year, I think that the Steelers' offense is going to be in enough situations where they can score 2 or 3 touchdowns per game more often than the Bears will be.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I absolutely love this one. I'm very jealous that I didn't get to steal it as mine, because I think that it's one of those that sounds really spicy and sounds really hot takey, but actually is really logical in that I think I wouldn't be shocked if both offenses put up similar numbers. I wouldn't be shocked if both offenses put up similar volume of touchdowns. But I think this Steelers offense is going to be Kenny Pickett led. And I think that it's going to be Kenny Pickett led in the red zone. You just look at the weapons of, as you listed there, you've got Pat Freiermuth, you've got George Pickens, you've got Diontae Johnson that can get open at will. Whereas I think that this Bears offense is going to lean around that run game in the red zone. And so I think it sounds hot takey, but I think it makes absolute perfect sense. So my next one, my final one, the Jaguars passing game. Now, Calvin Ridley and Trevor Lawrence will lead the league in 20-plus yard receptions. Now, Calvin Ridley, in his last full season with the Falcons, led the entire league in 20-plus yard receptions. Trevor Lawrence last year, he was tied 13th with 24 completions of 20-plus yards downfield. Now, that's 10 behind the leader in Josh Allen. So he's got quite a big jump to kind of make up. But I really think that Calvin Ridley is going to unlock something in Trevor Lawrence. I think that they're going to give him that element to push the ball downfield. We saw last year that Christian Kirk is that speed slot. He's going to be able to slide into a more natural position where he can run that seam, find that space down the middle of the field. But Calvin Ridley is a true number one receiver. And I think that he can make this whole offense take a step forward. And I think that the final hurdle that Trevor Lawrence needs to overtake is that great deep ball. We've seen him operate in that short to intermediate route, throw with anticipation. He's been phenomenal for 2 years, but he's still lacking that kind of elite accuracy, that elite ability down the field. And I think that Calvin Ridley is going to unlock that. And I think this whole offense is going to take a step forward.
I like this one a lot. I think the main part where, if I was building a case against it, I would say, is this division going to put them in situations enough across 6 games that they play where they need to be taking shots downfield? You look at the games against the Texans, the Titans, and the Colts. I mean, the Colts are a mess right now. They've got 3 active wide receivers on the roster after cutting Isaiah McKenzie. The Texans, they don't have a prolific passing game. And then the Titans, I mean, we've talked about them in one of our other takes already about how it's very difficult to build a bold case around their passing game. And that's what I kind of connect with this. It's like, how many teams are you going to come up against where they're forcing you to go for the big play and go big with it rather than just grinding out drives? So I like it. I think it makes perfect sense. You know, Calvin Ridley's seen a deep target on 21% of his career targets. Never had an average depth of target below 10. And that does feel like what they're missing. I think his production is going to come more at the expense of Zay Jones, Van Christian Kirk, despite what they were doing in preseason. But yeah, I mean, I'm all in on this Jags offense. I'm just not quite sure whether they get pushed enough.
Yeah, and I get that, but let's remember that division games are only 6 out of 17. You know, they've still got to, the Jags are playing a first place schedule, having won the division last year. They've still got to go and play the AFC North. They've got to play the NFC South. Like that's 8 tough games they've got to play there. And I think that there's going to be enough games that they're going to be in contention. They're also playing the Chiefs. Like there's enough there that I think that they're going to have to throw the ball, and you know, they're not going to be leading every game 20-30 points by halftime. I think they're going to be pushing the ball downfield. So your final hot take to round us all out here, Tom, hit me with it.
Yeah, I'm saying that 3 rookie wide receivers will finish as top 24 wide receivers. So, and if I was really forced to, I'd name them as Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. So last year, Garrett Wilson and George Pickens just finished outside of this range at wide receiver 29 and 32. In 2021, Chase and Waddle finished as wide receiver 5 and 14. 2020, Justin Jefferson was wide receiver 11, Ayuk wide receiver 17, CeeDee Lamb wide receiver 28. 2019, nobody did it. McLaurin and AJ Brown were both around wide receiver 30. 2018, DJ Chark, wide receiver 14, which seems crazy to say now. DJ Moore, wide receiver 16, and Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 18. Courtland Sutton was wide receiver 25. So that's the kind of outcomes that we're looking for. Like, I think that there would probably have to be some very unfortunate injury luck for Justin Jefferson, for Jordan Addison to get there, or he even needs to be incredible and TJ Hawkinson takes a complete backwards step, something which we've talked about on the channel at other points and believe is a possibility anyway. Zay Flowers, I think, can get there. I think he wins the ball in areas of the field, which Lamar's excellent at throwing to. And Jackson Smith and Jigba, I mean, we've been singing his praises all off-season, really. I think the wrist injury is a slight concern, but I think in PPR formats, he's going to be such a volume hog that he can get there. But yeah, I'm very high on this wide receiver class overall, and I want one or two of them in every draft I'm doing.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm the dynasty guy. I'm the guy that's obsessed with rookies. It felt like March, April time. Everybody was down on this class. Everybody was talking about its JSN and nothing. Jordan Addison was a 96th percentile prospect for me in my model. JSN was 90 plus. Say Flowers was in the 90th percentile. Like, this is a really good rookie wide receiver class. They've landed in some phenomenal situations where Jordan Addison you couldn't have picked a perfect situation than that. Zay Flowers could be the target leader for an improving offense. JSN, again, yes, he's got 2 target hogs either side of him, but that's a perfect role where he's going to be able to do what he does best and not asked to do anything else. And then you can even throw in the mix. You've got people like Jaden Reed, who I'm a huge fan and I think could lead the Packers in targets this year, and he's in an ideal role. Then you've got Quentin Johnson, who I'm not the biggest fan of. I've got some question marks about him. But if Kellen Moore wants to get really inventive, and we've seen what he can do with the ball in his hands, he could have a Chase Claypool-like rookie season where that second half of the season, we're just seeing him used in such weird games and he scores so many touchdowns that suddenly he sneaks as a back end into the top 24. So I think it's a really reasonable take, and I don't think it's hot to say that the 3 guys will finish in the top 24, because I think I would be shocked if it didn't happen, put it that way.
So you're saying I'm not being spicy enough?
Well, yeah. I'm saying you need to up it, Tom. And I think naming the 3, I think I'll let you off with that one.
Okay, well, yeah. I mean, I essentially did. So yeah, go on, hit us with your last one, Rich.
No, that's it. That rounds us out. That is the show. If there's any hot takes that you disagree with, or any hot takes of your own that you want to let us know in the comments below, and then you can come back and victory lap in 3 months once we see it all happen. Whilst you're here, hit that like, hit that subscribe. And also, if you're enjoying the content, you can join. You become a member, get in the Discord, get access to all of my ranks, all of my dynasty values, all of Tom's DFS content, and so much more. We'll see you soon.